I, 26F, stood at the altar, my hand tucked into my father's arm. The music was soft. The flowers smelled sweet. Everything felt perfect, exactly like the dream I had been having since I was a little girl. My fiancé, Mark, 28M, was waiting for me. His smile was the only thing I could see clearly. My father squeezed my hand gently. He was my hero. He had always been my rock, the person I could count on for anything. He built a successful business from nothing. He gave my mother and me a beautiful life. Seeing the pride in his eyes as he prepared to give me away made my heart feel full. The minister began to speak. His words were a warm, comforting sound. I looked at Mark, and he looked at me. In that moment, the rest of the world disappeared. It was just us. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the church creaked open. Everyone turned to look. I thought it was just a late guest, but the figure standing there was not dressed for a wedding. He wore a dark blue uniform, a police officer. He walked slowly down the aisle, his steps echoing in the sudden silence. The music had stopped. The minister's voice had faded away. The officer's face was serious, and his eyes were fixed on one person. My father. He stopped right in front of us. He did not look at me or Mark. He looked directly at my dad. My heart started to beat very fast. I felt a confusing mix of fear and curiosity. What was happening? Was there a problem? The officer spoke, and his voice was loud and clear in the quiet church. "Are you Robert Miller?" he asked. My father's face went pale. He let go of my hand. His confident smile was gone. He looked like a stranger. He nodded slowly. Just once. The officer did not hesitate. He looked from my father to the shocked faces of our guests. Then he said the words that broke my world into a million pieces. "This man has been a fugitive for 20 years. A gasp went through the crowd. It was a wave of sound, a collective breath of disbelief. My mother, sitting in the front pew, made a small, choked noise. Mark took a step toward me, his face a mask of confusion. I could not move. I could not breathe. It felt like a nightmare. This had to be a mistake. A terrible, cruel joke. My father? A fugitive? The man who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me with my homework? The man who volunteered in our community and was respected by everyone? It was impossible. It simply could not be true. I turned to my father. I needed him to laugh and tell everyone this was a prank. I needed him to fix it, like he always fixed everything. But he did not. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped. He looked defeated. He looked guilty. That was the moment the floor fell out from under me. The officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metallic click echoed through the church. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. He placed them on my father's wrists. My father did not resist. He did not say a word. He just closed his eyes for a second. "What is this about?" I finally managed to say. My voice was a weak whisper. The officer looked at me with a hint of pity. "Ma'am, your father is wanted for grand larceny and fraud in another state. He has been a wanted man since 1998. Grand larceny. Fraud. The words meant nothing to me. They were from movies and television shows. They had nothing to do with my life, with my family. My father was an honest businessman. He was a good man, or so I had believed for my entire life. The officer started to lead my father away. My dad looked back at me one last time. His eyes were full of a deep sadness I had never seen before. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. Then he was gone, escorted out of the church, leaving behind a room full of stunned guests and a bride whose perfect day had just become the worst day of her life. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. No one knew what to do or say. My beautiful wedding was over before it had even truly begun. My white dress suddenly felt like a costume. The flowers on the altar seemed to wilt before my eyes. Mark came to my side and put his arm around me. I leaned into him, but I felt numb. I could not process what had just happened. My mother was now sobbing openly, her face buried in her hands. Mark's parents were hurrying toward us, their faces etched with worry and shock. The wedding planner was whispering frantically into her phone. My life, so carefully planned and perfectly arranged, had just been demolished by a truth I never knew existed. Who was my father? And what did this mean for me? For my mother? For all of us? The questions swirled in my head, but there were no answers. There was only the empty space where my father had stood, and the echoing sound of handcuffs clicking shut. I felt Mark's hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. I shook my head. I was not okay. I did not think I would ever be okay again. "I do not understand," I whispered. His parents, John and Mary, reached us. Mary put a hand on my arm. "Oh, sweetie," she said. "This is just unbelievable. Are you sure there has not been some mistake?" I looked at her, hoping she was right. "It has to be a mistake," I said, trying to convince myself. But I had seen my father's face. The guilt was written all over it. There was no mistake. John, always the practical one, spoke to Mark. "Son, we need to get everyone out of here. We need to handle this quietly." Quietly. As if a man being arrested in the middle of a wedding ceremony could ever be quiet. The guests were already starting to murmur, their whispers filling the vast space of the church. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. I felt exposed, humiliated. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it was a public spectacle of my family's hidden shame. Mark nodded at his father. "You are right," he said. He then turned to the guests and raised his voice. "I am sorry, everyone. There has been an emergency. We have to ask you to please leave. We will be in touch." His words were formal and detached, but they worked. People started to stand up and file out of the pews, their voices low as they talked among themselves. I did not watch them go. I kept my eyes fixed on the spot where my father had stood. It felt like a hole had been burned into the floor. A hole that led straight down into a dark, unknown place. My mother came over to me, her face streaked with tears. She grabbed my hands. Her skin was cold. "We have to go to the police station," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to help him." "Help him?" The police said he was a fugitive. How could we help him? "Mom, what is going on?" I asked, my voice pleading. "Do you know anything about this?" She avoided my eyes. "I do not know," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It must be a misunderstanding. Your father would never do anything illegal." Her denial felt hollow. It sounded like something she was saying because she was supposed to say it, not because she believed it. I felt a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. She knew something. Maybe not everything, but she knew something. For the first time in my life, I looked at my mother and felt a flicker of distrust. Mark drove us to the police station. His parents followed in their car. The ride was silent. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the world passing by. The sun was shining. People were laughing and walking their dogs. It was a normal day for everyone else, while my world had stopped spinning. My beautiful wedding dress felt ridiculous now. I was still wearing the veil. I reached up and pulled it off, balling it up in my lap. The fabric was soft and delicate, a stark contrast to the harsh reality I was now facing. At the station, a stern-looking woman at the front desk told us we would have to wait. My mother started to protest, but I put a hand on her arm. Yelling would not help. We sat on a hard plastic bench in the waiting area. The air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. It was the opposite of the sweet scent of wedding flowers. An hour passed, then another. My mother paced back and forth, wringing her hands. Mark sat beside me, holding my hand. He did not say much, but his presence was a small comfort. His parents had offered to wait with us, but I told them to go home. This was my family's mess to deal with. Finally, a detective came out to speak with us. He introduced himself as Detective Harris. He was the one who had been tracking my father. He led us into a small, windowless room. He looked tired. "I am sorry for the way this happened," he said, his voice flat. "We had information that he would be at this location today, and we could not risk letting him slip away again." "Slip away again?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "He has lived in our town for over 20 years. The detective sighed. "To you, he was Robert Miller. To us, he is Daniel Albright. He disappeared in 1998 from a city hundreds of miles away, along with $2 million from the investment firm where he worked. He left behind a wife and a young son." The words hit me like a physical blow. A wife? A son? My father had another family? I looked at my mother. Her face was ashen. She sank into a chair looking like she was about to faint. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a whole other life. My father was not who I thought he was. My entire childhood, my entire identity, was built on a foundation of lies. "I do not believe you," I said, my voice shaking. "My father would not do that." Detective Harris opened a file he was carrying. He pulled out an old photograph. It was a picture of a younger man who looked strikingly like my father, standing next to a woman and a little boy. The man was smiling, the same smile my father had given me my whole life. "This is Daniel Albright and his family," the detective said softly. "The woman, Sarah, and their son, Matthew. They have spent the last 20 years wondering what happened to him. They thought he was dead." I stared at the photograph. The man in the picture was my dad. There was no doubt. But the life in that picture was not my life. Who were these people? Did my father ever love us? Or were we just part of his cover story, a convenient new family to help him hide from his past? The cold knot in my stomach tightened. The betrayal was so deep it felt like it was hollowing me out from the inside. My mother started to cry again, this time with a deep, wrenching sound of despair. "I did not know," she sobbed. I swear I did not know about them. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that she was as much a victim in this as I was. But a part of me, a small, cold part, wondered if she was telling the whole truth. How could you live with a man for over 20 years and not know he was hiding such a massive secret? The detective let us sit with the information for a moment. He seemed to understand that our world had just been shattered. "We will need to interview both of you," he said eventually. "Separately." I nodded, feeling detached from my own body. It was like I was watching a movie about someone else's life, someone else's tragedy. They took my mother in first. I sat with Mark in the hallway. He had been quiet through the whole ordeal, just a steady presence by my side. "Mark," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "what are we going to do?" He turned to me, his eyes full of sorrow. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but we will figure it out together. I am not going anywhere." His words should have been a comfort, but they felt distant. How could we be a we when my entire past was a lie? My name was not even really my name if my father was not Robert Miller. Who was I? I was the daughter of a thief and a liar, a man who abandoned one family to start another one under a false name. The shame was so overwhelming I felt like I was drowning in it. I thought about the other family, the wife who thought her husband was dead, the son who grew up without a father. My father had not just stolen money, he had stolen lives. He had stolen their peace, their closure, and he had stolen my truth. When it was my turn to talk to the detective, I felt empty. I answered his questions mechanically. When did I first meet my father? I did not. He was always there. What did he do for a living? He ran a successful construction company. Did he ever talk about his past? No, he always said he came from a small town and did not have much family. It all sounded so plausible then. Now, it was just a flimsy cover story. Did he ever seem nervous or secretive? Detective Harris asked. I thought back over the years. My dad was always careful. He did not like having his picture taken. He never used social media. He paid for everything in cash whenever possible. At the time, I just thought he was a private person. Now, all those little quirks looked like the actions of a man on the run, a man terrified of being found. He was always private, I said. I thought it was just his personality. The detective nodded as if he had heard this 100 times before. Fugitives learn to be very good at hiding in plain sight, he said. After the interview, we were allowed to leave. They were holding my father without bail. He was going to be extradited back to the state where he committed his crimes. I might not even see him again before he was gone. As we walked out of the police station, the sun was starting to set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sunset, but I could not appreciate it. My perfect day had ended in ruins, and my life was now a mess of lies and unanswered questions. Mark drove us back to my mother's house. She was silent the whole way, staring out the window. When we got there, the house felt different. It was no longer the warm, happy home I grew up in. It felt like a stage, a set for a play that had just ended. The props were all in place, but the actors were gone. My mother went straight to her room and closed the door. I did not try to stop her. I did not know what to say to her. Mark stayed with me in the living room. My wedding gifts were piled up in a corner, a mocking reminder of the future that had been stolen from me. I should call my parents, Mark said softly. They are worried sick. I nodded. You should, I said. They need to know what is happening. He hesitated. What do I tell them? The truth, I said, the word tasting like poison in my mouth. Tell them my father is a criminal who had another family. Tell them my whole life is a lie. My voice was bitter. I could not help it. I was angry. I was hurt. And I was deeply, profoundly ashamed. Mark looked pained. He did not deserve this. His family did not deserve this. They had welcomed me into their lives with open arms, and now I had brought this scandal to their doorstep. This is not your fault, he said, as if reading my mind. It feels like it is, I replied. My name is a lie. My family is a lie. What does that make me? He did not have an answer. He just pulled me into a hug. I let myself cry then, for the first time since it all happened. I cried for the wedding I lost, for the father I thought I knew, and for the girl I used to be. She was gone forever, replaced by a stranger who had to figure out how to live with a truth that was uglier than anything she could have ever imagined. The next few days were a blur. The news spread like wildfire through our small town. The phone rang constantly with calls from friends, relatives, and even reporters. We did not answer. My mother stayed in her room, refusing to see or speak to anyone. I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. I called the caterers, the florist, the photographer, and canceled everything. Each call was a fresh wave of humiliation. I had to explain that the wedding was off because the father of the bride had been arrested. Some were sympathetic, others were just curious, fishing for gossip. Mark's parents came over. They were kind, but there was a new distance in their eyes. They were worried about their son, and I could not blame them. We are so sorry you are going through this, dear, Mary said, her voice gentle. But we have to be realistic, John added, his tone more serious. This is a major scandal. It could affect Mark's career, his reputation. Mark worked at a conservative law firm. His father was right. Being associated with a fugitive's family was not good for business. I understand, I said, my voice small. I would not blame you if you wanted Mark to end things with me. We would never tell him what to do, Mary said quickly. But you two have a lot to think about. They were right. We did. Later that evening, after they left, Mark and I had the conversation I had been dreading. My parents are freaking out, he said, running a hand through his hair. They think this will ruin me. Are they right? I asked. my heart aching. He sighed. I do not know, maybe, but that is not what I am worried about right now. I am worried about you. Do not be, I said, putting up a wall. I will be fine. Stop it, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Do not shut me out. We are supposed to be a team. How can we be a team when my whole life is built on a lie? I shot back, my emotions getting the better of me. My last name belongs to a man who does not exist. The money that paid for my college education was probably stolen. Everything is tainted, Mark. I am tainted. You are not tainted, he insisted. You are the same person you were yesterday. But I was not. I was the daughter of Daniel Albright, a man who had hurt people, a man who had abandoned his own child. That was a part of me now, whether I liked it or not. We talked for hours that night. He was trying so hard to be supportive, to be the man I was supposed to marry. But I could see the strain on his face. The weight of my family's scandal was already crushing us. He loved me, I knew that. But was love enough to survive this? I was not so sure. The next morning, I decided I could not hide anymore. I needed answers. My mother was still locked in her room, so I started looking for them myself. I went into my father's home office. It was a room I had always been proud of. It was a symbol of his success. Now, it just felt like the lair of a con man. I did not know what I was looking for. I just started opening drawers, sifting through papers. It was mostly business documents, invoices, and blueprints for his construction projects. It all seemed legitimate. But he was a man who had hidden his identity for 20 years. He would know how to cover his tracks. In the back of his desk drawer, underneath a stack of old tax returns, I found a small, locked metal box. I had never seen it before. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. This had to be where he kept his secrets. I did not have a key. I took the box to the garage and found a hammer and a screwdriver. It took me a few tries, but I finally managed to pry the lock open. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. Inside, there were not any stacks of cash or fake passports like I had half expected. There were just a few items. A faded photograph of the woman and the little boy from the police station. On the back it said, Sarah and Matthew, 1997. There was a small, worn leather wallet. Inside was a driver's license with my father's real name, Daniel Albright, and his old address. There was also a bundle of letters tied together with a rubber band. They were from his first wife, Sarah. They were dated from the year after he disappeared. She was begging him to come home, telling him she forgave him, that they could work things out. She wrote about their son, how much he missed his daddy. Reading them made me feel sick. He knew they were looking for him. He knew they were in pain. And he did nothing. He just built a new life and pretended they never existed. The last thing in the box was a single, folded piece of paper. It was a birth certificate. For a moment, I thought it was his. But the name on it was not Daniel Albright. The name was Thomas Miller, and the date of birth was 25 years before my father's. I did not understand. Who was Thomas Miller? I looked closer at the document. It was old and yellowed. Then I saw the date of death, stamped in red ink at the bottom. Thomas Miller had died as a child over 50 years ago. It took me a moment to put it all together. Robert Miller was not a name my father invented. It was a real name, the name of a dead person. He had stolen the identity of a dead child to create his new life. The level of deception was staggering. It was cold, calculated, and cruel. This was not a man who made a mistake and ran away. This was a man who had meticulously erased his past and built a new one on a foundation of lies and stolen identities. I took the box and its contents and went to my mother's room. I knocked on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Mom, we need to talk, I said, my voice firm. I know you are in there. I heard a faint shuffling sound, and then the door opened a crack. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she had not changed her clothes. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I pushed the door open and walked in. I held up the metal box. "I found this in Dad's office," I said. "I think you need to see what is inside." I sat on the edge of her bed and laid out the contents: the photograph, the wallet, the letters, the birth certificate of the dead child. She stared at them, her face crumbling. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the picture of Sarah and Matthew. "I did not know about them," she whispered again. "I swear, I did not know he had a family." "But you knew he was not Robert Miller, did not you?" I asked, my voice cold. "You knew he was hiding from something." She started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. She nodded. "He told me he had gotten into some trouble when he was younger," she said, her voice barely audible. "Some business deal that went bad. He said he had to leave his old life behind to protect himself. He said Robert Miller was a new start." "A new start?" I repeated, my voice rising with anger. "Mom, he stole $2 million. He abandoned his family. He stole a dead child's identity. That is not trouble. That is the work of a monster." "Do not call him that," she said, a flash of defiance in her eyes. "You do not understand. He was a good man to us. He was a wonderful father to you." "Was he?" I shot back. "A good father does not build his daughter's life on a pile of lies. A good father does not teach his child that it is okay to run away from your problems and hurt people." We argued for a long time. She defended him, making excuses for him, trying to separate the man she loved from the criminal he was. But I could not do that. They were the same person. The loving father and the ruthless con man were one and the same, and I had to accept that. During the argument, she let something slip, something that made my blood run cold. She was talking about how they met, how he was so charming and mysterious. "He told me he could not stay in one place for too long at first," she said. "We moved 3 times in the first 2 years I knew him. He was always looking over his shoulder." "So you knew he was on the run?" I said. "I knew he was scared," she corrected. "I did not ask questions. I loved him. I wanted to build a life with him." "And what about the money?" I asked, my voice sharp. "The money he used to start his business, to buy this house. Where did that come from?" She looked away. "He said he had some savings," she mumbled. "Savings?" I scoffed. "Or was it the $2 million he stole?" She did not answer. She did not have to. I knew the truth. She had to have known. Maybe she did not know the details about the other family or the stolen identity, but she knew the money was not clean. She knew he was a wanted man. And she had chosen to live with that lie for over 20 years. She was not just a victim. She was an enabler. She had helped him build his fake life, and she had benefited from it. Just like I had. The thought made me feel sick to my stomach. My entire comfortable, privileged life was funded by stolen money. It was a debt I could never repay. The fight ended with me walking out of her room, the box of secrets in my hand. I could not look at her anymore. The betrayal was too raw. It was not just my father who had lied to me. My mother had lied to me too, every single day of my life with her silence. I went back to my room and called the only person I could think of who might be able to help me make sense of it all. I called Detective Harris. I met him at a coffee shop the next day. I did not want him coming to the house. I did not want my mother to know I was talking to him. I brought the metal box with me. I laid out the contents on the table for him. He looked at each item carefully, his expression unreadable. "This is quite a find," he said, picking up the birth certificate of Thomas Miller. "This confirms how he created his new identity. It is a classic move for long-term fugitives." "What happens now?" I asked. "We will use this as evidence against him," he said. "It strengthens the case for fraud and identity theft, on top of the grand larceny charges. He is not getting out of this." I nodded slowly. A part of me should have been sad about that, but mostly I just felt a grim sense of justice. He deserved to be punished for what he did. There is something else, I said, my voice low. I think my mother knew. Not everything, but she knew he was on the run. She knew the money was not legitimate. Detective Harris listened patiently as I told him what my mother had said. He did not seem surprised. It is common for partners to be complicit, either actively or through willful ignorance, he said. It is hard to prove in court unless she actively helped him evade capture. From what you have told me, it sounds like she just chose not to ask the questions she did not want the answers to. So she will not get in trouble? I asked. Probably not, he said. Legally, she might be in the clear, but morally, that is a different story. He was right. My mother might not face a judge, but she would have to face me. And I did not know if I could ever forgive her for her part in the lie. Before I left, I asked the detective one more question. It was the one that had been haunting me the most. His other family, I said. The wife and son. Do they know he has been found? He nodded. Yes, I contacted them myself. It was a difficult conversation. They have been through a lot. What will happen to them? I asked. There is a victims' restitution fund, he said. If we can recover any of the stolen assets, they will be the first to receive it. It will not make up for the last 20 years, but it is something. Assets. That meant our house, our savings. Everything my father had built. It was all built with stolen money. And it would all have to be given back. We were going to lose everything. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. Losing our home and our money was a terrifying thought. But it also felt right. It was not ours to begin with. It was blood money, and I wanted nothing to do with it. When I got home, Mark was there. He had been staying with me, sleeping on the couch. He did not want to leave me alone. How did it go? He asked, seeing the look on my face. I told him everything. About the box, about my mother's confession, about the conversation with the detective. I told him that we were going to lose the house, that all the money was gone. I laid it all out, the whole ugly truth. I wanted him to know exactly what he would be getting into if he stayed with me. I am broke, Mark, I said, my voice flat. My family is a disgrace. My name means nothing. You should walk away. No one would blame you. He looked at me for a long time, his expression serious. I braced myself for the end. I expected him to say it was too much, that he could not do this. But he did not. I am not going anywhere, he said, his voice firm. I told you we are a team. We will figure this out. We will start over. Together. Why? I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. Why would you stay with me through this? Because I love you, he said simply. Not your name, not your house, not your father's money. I love you. The person you are. And the person you are is strong and honest and good. None of what he did changes that. I broke down then, sobbing in his arms. His words were a lifeline in the middle of a raging storm. Maybe he was right. Maybe I could get through this. Maybe my father's lies did not have to define me. With Mark by my side, I felt a tiny flicker of hope for the first time since my world had fallen apart. It was not going to be easy. It was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done. But for the first time, I felt like I was not completely alone in the wreckage. The next step was the hardest. I had to face my mother again. I went to her room, determined to set things straight. She was sitting by the window, staring out at the garden my father had so carefully tended. The police know you knew, I said without any preamble. I told them what you said. She flinched but did not turn to look at me. Why would you do that? She asked, her voice full of hurt. Because it is the truth, I said. And I am done with lies. I am done protecting him. I am done pretending. He was your father, she whispered. He was a stranger who raised me. I corrected her. And you helped him. You let me live a lie for my entire life. You let me believe in a man who did not exist. I did it to protect you, she said, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were pleading. I wanted you to have a happy childhood. I wanted you to have everything. I did not want everything, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I just wanted the truth. I had a right to know who my father was. I had a right to know that our life was built on a crime. I was scared, she admitted, her voice breaking. If I had left him, what would I have done? I had no money, no family to turn to. He gave us a good life. He gave us a stolen life, I said. And now it is over. Detective Harris told me about the victim's restitution. We are going to lose this house, Mom. We are going to lose everything. The color drained from her face. She had not thought that far ahead. She had been so focused on the immediate crisis of his arrest that she had not considered the long-term consequences. They cannot take our home, she said, her voice a panicked whisper. It is not our home, I said firmly. It was bought with stolen money. It belongs to his victims, to the family he abandoned. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. She was going to be left with nothing. No husband, no home, no money. Just the shame of what her husband had done and her own complicity in it. I should have felt some satisfaction, some sense of victory. But I did not. I just felt a profound sadness for the mess our family had become. What are we going to do? She asked, looking at me as if I had all the answers. I do not know what you are going to do, I said, my voice hardening. But I know what I am going to do. I am going to cooperate with the police. I am going to help them make sure that his first family gets back every penny that he stole from them. And then, I am going to build a life for myself. An honest one. I set a boundary then. A hard one. I need some space, Mom, I said. I cannot live here with you right now, pretending things are okay. I need to be away from all the lies. She started to protest, to beg me to stay. But my mind was made up. I could not heal in the house that was a monument to my father's deception. I needed a clean break. I packed a bag with some clothes and my personal belongings. Mark helped me. He told me I could stay with him at his apartment. His parents would not be happy about it, but he did not care. He was choosing me. That meant more to me than he would ever know. As I was about to leave, I stopped at the front door. My wedding dress was still in its garment bag, hanging on the coat rack where I had left it. I took it down. I could not stand the sight of it. I took it out to the backyard and threw it in the trash can. It was a symbol of a life that was never real. A future that was based on a lie. I was not that bride anymore. I was not the daughter of Robert Miller. I was just me. And for the first time, I had to figure out who that was. Living with Mark was a strange new reality. His small apartment was a world away from the spacious house I grew up in, but it was honest. It was real, and for that, I was grateful. His parents were, as expected, not thrilled. They had a tense dinner with us where they made their feelings clear. Mark, we love you, his mother said, her hands clasped tightly on the table. And we care for you, Clara, but you must understand our position. This association with your family, it is not good. It is a career killer, his father stated bluntly. The partners at his firm value discretion and reputation above all else. This story is all over the local news. Everyone knows. I am not going to abandon her, Mark said, his jaw set. If the firm has a problem with that, then it is not the right place for me. I was stunned by his loyalty. He was willing to risk his career, his future, for me. It was a debt I could never repay. But it also filled me with a fierce determination. I would not let my father's actions ruin Mark's life. I had to do something. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not for my father, but for myself and my mother. We needed someone to navigate the legal process of asset forfeiture. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis, confirmed what I already suspected. Everything would have to be sold. The house, the cars, any stocks or savings. The proceeds would go into a restitution fund. She advised us to cooperate fully. It was our only chance of salvaging anything, even our dignity. My mother was a wreck. The thought of losing her home and her comfortable lifestyle was devastating to her. She fought it at first, wanting to hire a different lawyer to try and protect her assets. "I am a victim in this too," she would say. "Why should I be punished?" "Because you lived off stolen money for 20 years. I would reply, my patience wearing thin. "Whether you knew the details or not, you benefited from a crime. This is the consequence." Eventually, she gave in. She had no choice. She was completely dependent on me now, and I was not going to budge. I was determined to do the right thing, no matter how painful it was. During this time, I started my own investigation. I wanted to know everything about my father's past. I wanted to understand the man he was before he became my dad. I spent hours at the library, scrolling through microfilm of old newspapers from the city he fled. I found articles about the disappearance of Daniel Albright, the promising young executive who vanished with $2 million of his client's money. The articles painted a picture of a charismatic, ambitious man who had betrayed everyone who trusted him. I also found the name of his business partner, the man he had stolen from. His name was Arthur Vance. The article said that the theft had ruined him, both financially and personally. The firm had collapsed, and Arthur had lost everything. It was another layer of my father's cruelty. He had not just stolen from faceless clients. He had destroyed the life of a man who had been his friend. I found a current address for Arthur Vance online. He was living in a small town a few hours away. I knew I had to talk to him. I had to apologize for what my father did. It was a long shot, but I had to try. I told Mark what I was planning to do. He was worried. "Are you sure that is a good idea?" he asked. "He might not want to see you. It could be very painful for him." "I know," I said, "but I have to do it. I feel like I owe it to him. I need to look him in the eye and tell him that I am sorry for what my family did to his." So I drove to the small town where Arthur Vance lived. It was a quiet, unassuming place. I found his house, a modest little bungalow with a well-tended garden. I sat in my car for a long time, trying to work up the courage to knock on the door. What would I say? How could I possibly make up for 20 years of pain and loss? Finally, I got out of the car and walked up the path. I knocked on the door. An elderly man with kind eyes and a weary face answered. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. "Are you Arthur Vance?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I am," he said. "Can I help you?" "My name is Clara," I said, taking a deep breath. My father was Daniel Albright." His face changed instantly. The kindness in his eyes was replaced by a look of deep, old pain. He was silent for a moment, just staring at me. I thought he was going to slam the door in my face. I would not have blamed him. But he did not. He just sighed, a long, tired sound. "I see," he said. "You had better come in." I followed him into his small, tidy living room. We sat in silence for a few moments. I did not know where to begin. "I read about what happened," I said finally. "About the firm, about the money. I am so sorry. I know that does not change anything, but I needed to say it." He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. "You look like him," he said. "You have his eyes." The words were not an accusation, just a statement of fact, but they still felt like a punch to the gut. "I found out when everyone else did," I said, needing him to know that I was not part of the lie. "At my wedding." He nodded slowly. "I saw it on the news," he said. "After all these years, I never thought they would find him." We talked for over an hour. He told me about his friendship with my father. They had been best friends, like brothers. They had built their firm from the ground up. They had trusted each other completely. He was the most charming man I ever knew, Arthur said, a sad smile on his face. He could sell anything to anyone. I handled the numbers and he handled the people. We were a perfect team. Then he told me about the betrayal. How my father had systematically siphoned money from client accounts over a period of months. How he had covered his tracks so perfectly that no one suspected a thing until he was long gone. It was not just the money, Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. He took my reputation, my future, my trust in people. He took everything. He told me how he had spent years trying to pay back the clients my father had stolen from, how he had sold his own house and cashed in his retirement savings. He had been left with nothing. He had never recovered financially. The betrayal had cost him his marriage and his health. Listening to his story, I felt a fresh wave of shame and anger at my father. The damage he had caused was immeasurable. It was a ripple effect of destruction that had touched so many lives. There is something you should know, Arthur said, his voice dropping. It was not just about the money. There was more to it. He went to a desk in the corner of the room and came back with an old, worn file. He opened it and showed me a letter. It was a legal document, a notice of intent to sue. It was from a group of investors who had lost their life savings in a bad investment my father had pushed on them. Danny was getting desperate, Arthur explained. He had made some bad calls, lost a lot of money on a risky venture. This lawsuit would have exposed him, ruined him. So he came up with a plan. He told me he had a way to fix it, a new investment that would make everything right. I trusted him. I signed the papers he put in front of me. It turned out the papers were not for a new investment. They were documents that gave my father sole access to the company's main accounts. He had tricked his best friend into signing over control of the entire firm. He framed me, Arthur said, his voice barely a whisper. When he disappeared, all the evidence pointed to me. The papers had my signature on them. I was the one who was investigated. I was the one who was almost charged. It took me years to clear my name. By then, it was too late. My life was already ruined. The cruelty of it took my breath away. My father had not just stolen from his friend. He had tried to send him to prison for his own crimes. This was a level of evil I could not comprehend. I have to go, I said, standing up abruptly. I could not sit there a moment longer. The weight of my father's sins was too much to bear. Arthur walked me to the door. I am sorry you had to find out this way, he said, his voice gentle again. It is not your fault. You are not him. His words were a small comfort, but they could not erase the horror of what I had just learned. I drove home in a daze. The image of Arthur's sad, tired face was burned into my mind. He was the true victim in all of this. He and the family my father had left behind. I knew then what I had to do. It was not enough to cooperate with the police. It was not enough to give back the money. I had to make sure that my father faced justice for every single thing he had done. I had to make sure that Arthur Vance's story was heard. The next time I saw my father was at his pre-trial hearing. He was brought into the courtroom in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. He looked older, smaller. He saw me sitting in the gallery with Mark and my mother. He tried to give me a small, sad smile. I just stared back at him, my face a mask of stone. I felt nothing for him anymore. The man I had loved was a phantom, an illusion. The man in the orange jumpsuit was a stranger, a monster who destroyed lives for his own selfish gain. His lawyer was trying to get him a plea deal. He was arguing that my father had lived a clean life for the past 20 years, that he was a respected member of his community. He was painting a picture of a man who had made one mistake and had spent the rest of his life trying to be good. I could not let that happen. After the hearing, I approached the prosecutor. I told her about my meeting with Arthur Vance. I told her about how my father had framed him. I gave her Arthur's contact information. I told her she had to talk to him. The prosecutor was interested. She promised to look into it. A few days later, she called me. She had spoken to Arthur. His story, combined with the evidence from the old case files, was enough to add new charges against my father: conspiracy, forgery, and attempting to frame an innocent man. The possibility of a plea deal was off the table. He was going to face a full trial, and he was going to have to answer for everything he had done. My mother was furious with me. "How could you do that to your own father?" She screamed at me over the phone. "You are sending him to prison for the rest of his life." "He deserves to be in prison for the rest of his life," I said calmly. "He ruined people's lives, Mom. He tried to send an innocent man to jail. He is not the victim here." Our relationship, already strained, broke completely after that. She saw me as a traitor, a daughter who had turned on her own father. I saw myself as a person who was finally choosing to do the right thing, no matter how much it hurt. We stopped speaking. The trial was a media circus. Reporters camped out on the courthouse steps. The story of the fugitive who lived a double life for 20 years was a sensation. I had to testify. So did my mother. And so did Arthur Vance. Mark was by my side the whole time, a quiet, steady source of support. His parents, seeing his unwavering commitment to me, had finally backed off. They still did not like the situation, but they had accepted that we were a team. On the stand, I told the truth. I talked about the life I had lived, the man I thought my father was, and the devastating discovery of his lies. I did not do it for sympathy. I did it to show the court the depth of his deception. When Arthur Vance took the stand, the courtroom was silent. He told his story with a quiet dignity that was heartbreaking. He looked at my father, who refused to meet his gaze. He talked about their friendship, their dreams, and the brutal betrayal that had shattered his life. There was not a dry eye in the room when he was done, but the most dramatic moment of the trial came from an unexpected source. My father's first wife, Sarah, and his son, Matthew, decided to attend. I saw them in the gallery, a woman with tired eyes and a young man with a hard, angry face. Matthew looked so much like my father. It was unnerving. During a break in the proceedings, Sarah approached me in the hallway. "You are Clara?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yes," I said. "I'm so sorry." She gave me a sad smile. "It is not your fault," she said, echoing the words of Arthur Vance. "You are as much a victim of his lies as we are." We talked for a few minutes. She told me about the life they had lived after he disappeared. The years of not knowing, of hoping he would come back. The financial struggles, the emotional toll. Matthew had grown up without a father, always wondering what he had done wrong, why his dad had left him. "He told me he was going on a business trip," she said, her voice catching. "He kissed me goodbye and said he would be back in a week, and then he was just gone." Her story was another knife in my already wounded heart. My father's selfishness was a bottomless pit. The verdict, when it came, was no surprise. Guilty, on all charges. The judge sentenced him to the maximum possible term. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. There was no sadness in his eyes this time, just cold, hard anger. He was not sorry for what he did. He was just sorry he got caught. After the trial, life slowly began to find a new normal. The house was sold, and the money was turned over to the restitution fund. It was divided between Arthur Vance and my father's first family. It was not enough to make up for what they had lost, but it was a start. My mother moved into a small apartment across town. She was working a retail job to support herself. We still were not speaking. The rift between us was too deep. Mark and I moved into a new apartment together. We were starting from scratch with very little money, but we were happy. We were building a life that was our own, free from the shadows of the past. His law firm, impressed by his loyalty and integrity, had stood by him. The scandal had faded from the headlines, and his career was secure. One day, about a year after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Matthew, my father's other child, my half-brother. I opened it with trembling hands. "I do not know why I am writing this," it began. I guess I just wanted to say thank you for helping to put him away, for making sure he could not hurt anyone else. He went on to say that he had spent his whole life hating the father who had abandoned him. Seeing him in court, seeing the cold, unrepentant man he was, had been a strange kind of closure. It had allowed him to finally let go of the fantasy that his father was a good man who had met with some tragic fate. He knew the truth now, and in a way, it had set him free. He ended the letter by saying that he and his mother were doing okay. The money from the restitution had helped, but more than that, the justice they had received had helped them to heal. I know this has been hard for you too, he wrote. I guess we are both just the children of a very bad man. I hope you find peace. I held the letter to my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace myself. He was right. We were both just the children of a bad man. But his actions did not have to define us. We could choose to be different. We could choose to be better. Mark and I got married a few months later. It was not the big, fancy wedding I had once dreamed of. It was a small ceremony at the city hall with just Mark's parents and a few close friends. I did not wear a white dress. I wore a simple blue one. My mother was not there. I had not invited her. It was a sad omission, but a necessary one. I could not start my new, honest life with her by my side. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As I stood there holding Mark's hand, I did not think about my father. I did not think about the lies or the trial or the pain. I just thought about the future. A future that I was going to build myself, on my own terms. A future that was based on truth. And love. And a strength I never knew I had. My old life was gone, burned to the ground. But from the ashes, I was building something new. Something real. And for the first time, I felt truly free. The name Miller was gone. I had legally changed it back to my mother's maiden name. I was no longer the daughter of a fugitive. I was my own person, ready to write my own story, one honest day at a time. The road ahead would be long, but I was not walking it alone. I had Mark, and I had the truth. And that was more than enough.